My best friend reported me for falling for the substitute coach. "Ryan, take the damn shot!" someone yelled from the sidelines, but I was already 3 moves ahead, the ball a blur under my hands and 3 defenders breathing down my neck. The first guy lunged too early. I spun past him, his arms clawing at nothing but air. The second cut me off at the key, quicker, sharper, but a feint left and a crossover to the right had him stumbling like a bad TikTok fail. And then there was Rob, my best friend and human brick wall. He matched my footwork, grinning like he knew he had me. I pumped a fake, watched him bite hard, and in the split second he committed, the ball left my fingertips. And with a clean swish, ball sank through the net. "Buckets," I muttered, jogging backward as the faint cheers from the sidelines barely registered. But I wasn't celebrating. I've been pulling moves like this all week, trying to carry the team, but nothing seemed to click. Coach Benson being sidelined with heart issues had crushed us. The Summer League tournament was weeks away, and for seniors like me, it was our last shot to make an impression, to get noticed. But our team morale? Dead. Momentum? Gone. And then there was Max Donovan, our substitute coach and Coach Benson's nephew. He lounged in a folding chair on the sideline, lazily spinning a whistle like it was tedious work. He didn't even look up until I glanced his way, and when he finally did, he scoffed. I froze. "Got something to say?" Max tilted his head, his gray eyes flicking up to meet mine, bored and unimpressed. "Not really," he drawled. "It's funny watching someone burn so much energy trying and failing to look impressive." "Excuse me?" I said, louder than I intended. Rob groaned from the sideline. "Bro, chill," he muttered. "You're gonna give yourself an aneurysm." Max stood, slow and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. "You've got talent, Torres," he said, stepping closer. "But all that wasted energy? That's why you're going in circles instead of leading a team." That smirk, that goddamn smirk, was the last straw. "All right, big man," I snapped. "If you've got all the answers hidden in that oversized hoodie of yours, why don't you show me?" The gym fell silent. Even Rob stopped moving, his face frozen in disbelief. "You really want to do this?" Max asked, tilting his head like I was a particularly interesting science experiment. "Yeah," I said, stepping forward. "One-on-one. Tonight." Rob grabbed my arm immediately. "Ryan, no. Don't do this." "Oh, I'm doing this," Max said with a chuckle, stepping even closer. "But only on one condition." "What's that?" I demanded. "No audience," he said, calm and sure. "Just you and me. No teammates, no distractions." I could feel Rob's eyes on me, practically begging me to let it go. But I wasn't about to back down. Not with Max looking at me like it was some rookie who didn't belong on his court. "Fine," I said. "Let's do this." Max smirked, tossing the whistle onto his chair. "Looking forward to it," he said, turning and strolling off the court. The gym buzzed with murmurs, my teammates whispering like this was a bad decision. Rob shook his head, muttering, "This is a terrible idea, man." Maybe it was, but I didn't care. Tonight, I was going to shut Max Donovan up. Later that evening. By 7:30 p.m., I'd spent the entire day replaying Max's smug face in my head, over and over. I was beyond ready to knock him down a peg. Or 12. I threw on a clean jersey, grabbed my bike, and headed to the gym. The doors opened without resistance, and the faint hum of the heating system filled the silence. The lights were off. I flipped the switch, and there he was. Max sat perched at the highest point of the bleachers, legs crossed, flipping through a magazine like he had nothing better to do. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, dropping my gym bag. Before I could call him out, his voice echoed across the empty gym. "Peach or maroon?" "What?" I blinked, thrown off by the question. He didn't even look up. "Sofas, Torres. My nana's coming into town and my apartment doesn't have one." "What kind of crappy apartment doesn't have a couch?" I asked, exasperated. Max's smirk vanished, and he snapped the magazine shut, rising with an almost predatory ease. For the first time, I really saw him. Tall, lean, and somehow intimidating even in an oversized hoodie and cargo pants. His sharp gaze cut through me. "Are we gonna stand around gossiping about furniture?" he asked, his voice low. "Or are we playing basketball?" The challenge in his tone was impossible to ignore, and it forced a smirk on me. "Let's do this." Max strolled to center court, the ball bouncing lazily in his hands. Everything about him, his posture, his pace, was maddeningly casual, like this wasn't even worth his energy. The air shifted, subtle but undeniable, like the gym itself was holding its breath. I shrugged off my jacket, tossing it to the sidelines as I stepped forward. My fingers twitched, itching to grab the ball and wipe that smug look off his face. We squared off. His hands stayed stuffed in his hoodie pocket, and he wasn't even in a defensive stance. He just stood there, watching me like I was a minor inconvenience. "Take a deep breath, Torres," Max said, his voice calm and utterly condescending. "It's not that serious." The smirk tugging at his lips was the final straw. "Let's do this," I muttered, bouncing on the balls of my feet. Max nodded once, flipping the ball into his palm. "Ready when you are." Round 1. Max dribbled lazily at the top of the key, his expression somewhere between bored and smug. His eyes flicked to mine, taunting. I wasn't here to play his game. I drove to the right, hard, testing him. His feet stayed planted, no reaction. Fine. I pushed harder, cutting toward the paint. His gaze tracked me, calm, unbothered, like he'd already seen how this would play out. The second I lined up my shot, the ball was gone. Max was halfway down the court before I even realized what happened. "Oh, come on!" I yelled, chasing after him. By the time I caught up, he was already mid-jump, the ball rolling cleanly off his fingertips. "Point," he said, tossing the ball back casually. I blinked, stunned. How? Round 2. I tightened my defense, shadowing his every move. Max moved effortlessly, his dribbles smooth, precise. I saw my chance when he shifted left, lunging to cut him off. And he spun, slipping past me with an ease that felt like mockery. "2," he said, not even winded. His smirk deepened, sharp and maddening. "You're going to make me work for this, right?" Round 3. This time I wasn't holding back. I drove straight to the rim, dodging left, then right. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me. But Max didn't flinch. Just as I went up for the shot, his arm came out of nowhere, swatting the ball clean out of my hands. "You're quick," he said, catching the ball before it could roll too far. But predictable. My jaw tightened. "You think this is funny?" He shrugged, dribbling back to center court. "A little." Round 4. I forced myself to calm down, locking onto his every move. He feinted left, and I stayed with him. Then he crossed right, but I anticipated it. Until he pivoted, spinning around me like I wasn't even there. "4," he said, his smirk now bordering on condescending. My fists clenched at my sides. "You're enjoying this way too much." His gaze dropped, lingering for just a moment. "Maybe a little," he said softly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Round 5. This was it, the last shot. Max moved slower this time, his eyes locked on mine. His intensity was unnerving, like he wasn't just trying to beat me, he was trying to read me. I mirrored him, step for step, refusing to give him even an inch. But then, he slipped past me, faster than I could track. The ball was already in the air before I had time to react. 5, he said, catching the ball on its bounce back. Max tossed the ball back to me like it was nothing. "You've got potential," he said, his voice maddeningly calm. "But you're not ready." My grip on the ball tightened, my pride screaming for me to say something. Anything. The words slipped out before I could stop them. If you're so good, why aren't you still playing? Max froze. When he turned back, the smirk was gone, replaced by something raw and unguarded. His eyes locked on mine, sharp and piercing, and for a moment the air between us shifted again. Ryan, he started, his voice quieter now, softer, like he wasn't sure what to say. I stepped forward, my breath catching in my throat. We were close now. Too close. I swore I saw something flicker behind his gaze. Something I wasn't quite sure of. But then, just as quickly, Max stepped back, the walls slamming back into place. Focus on your game, Torres, he said, his tone clipped and cold again. And with that, he turned and walked off the court, leaving me standing there, the ball heavy in my hands and my chest tighter than it had any right to be. The next day, practice was grueling. My muscles ached and sweat dripped down my neck, but it wasn't the drills that had me distracted. It was Max. Or more specifically, it was everything about last night. The game, the weird moment we had, and the maddening text that still sat unread on my phone. Don't tell them the result. Let them wonder. The others had pestered me the moment I walked in that morning. How'd it go? Did you win? Come on, spill! But I didn't tell them. I couldn't. Not after that text. Max had somehow set the rules of this strange, unspoken game we were now playing, and I hated how easily I fell in line. As practice wore on, the strangest part wasn't the text, or the lingering tension from last night. It was how much of Max's voice I was hearing in my head. Every time I moved to make one of my signature flashy plays, his words from the game echoed back. Why waste energy when you can outthink them? It was irritating. It was invasive. It was working. Instead of my usual style, I focused on efficiency. Clean drives, simple passes, textbook form. By the end of practice, my teammates were noticing. Yo, Torres! Rob called out, slapping my back after I sank a quick, perfect layup. Where's this been all season? You've been saving it for the tournament? I gave him a tight smile, trying to shrug it off, but my eyes betrayed me, drifting to the sideline. Max leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching with that same maddening calm. His eyes locked on mine, and I couldn't look away. There was something in that look, like he knew exactly what I was thinking, exactly what I couldn't get out of my head. His smirk curled just slightly, subtle, but devastating. I tore my gaze away, heat rising to my face. It wasn't from the workout. Torres! Max's voice suddenly cut across the gym. Keep your head in the game. The tournament isn't going to wait for you to figure it out. I froze, the ball slipping from my fingers. Rob shot me a look that was equal parts confusion and sympathy. Don't worry, coach, Rob called, trying to diffuse the tension. I'll keep him in check. Max didn't reply. He just turned and walked toward the sidelines, his presence impossible to ignore. Later that day after practice. By the end of practice, the team was in high spirits. Everyone filed out, laughing and shoving each other, their focus already shifting to the locker room. I lingered behind, grabbing my water bottle and waiting for the gym to clear. Max was still there, leaning against the bleachers, scrolling idly on his phone. I crossed the court, my sneakers squeaking against the floor. Max. He glanced up, his expression unreadable. Torres? I hesitated, suddenly unsure of how to start. About last night. He sighed, pocketing his phone. Work on your footwork, he said, his tone brisk. Don't waste your energy on the wrong things. That's not what I meant, I said, stepping closer. Max didn't move, but his eyes flicked to mine, cool and assessing. Focus on your game, Torres. The tournament's what matters. The irritation bubbled up before I could stop it. What was last night? I demanded, my voice sharp as I grabbed his wrist. For a second, I thought I saw something in his eyes, something unguarded. But before either of us could say anything, the sound of a locker slamming broke the moment. Rob was standing in the doorway, his jaw tight, his hazel eyes narrowing as he took us in. "Ryan," he said, his voice low, tense. "Can we talk?" The tension in the room was suffocating. I released Max's wrist, stepping back reluctantly as Rob crossed the gym, his gaze hard. He didn't spare Max a glance as he grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the lockers. "Whatever that was," he muttered under his breath, "it stops now." "What are you talking about?" I shot back, yanking my arm free. Rob leaned in, his voice sharp. "This is our last chance, Ryan. The tournament is everything. Don't blow it." I stared at him, my chest tight with frustration. But for once, I didn't have a comeback. In the corner of my vision, Max turned and walked toward the other side of the gym, his steps measured and deliberate. He didn't look back. Why would he? 1 month later. The tournament was a grind, and I threw myself into it like my life depended on it, which, in a way, it did. My game had shifted dramatically. Every time I hit the court, it felt like Max was still in my head, correcting my moves, refining my instincts. I hated how much I relied on it, but I couldn't deny the results. Even Rob and the other guards grudgingly admitted, "You've been on fire lately. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I just nodded, not bothering to explain how much of it was Max. I wasn't sure Rob would understand or approve. Max, for his part, kept his distance. He never mentioned the night of the 1v1, and neither did I. But I couldn't ignore the way he looked at me during practice, the way his gaze lingered, how I could feel it on my back, my arms, even when he wasn't saying a word. And when he did speak, his voice was steady, calm, but there was always this edge, this heat underneath that left me reeling. "Good, Torres," he'd say when I landed a clean shot. "Now don't get cocky." I'd smirk, trying to play it cool, but inside my heart was doing backflips. One morning, the gym was eerily quiet except for the sound of the storm raging outside. I'd been here for over an hour, shooting aimlessly, trying and failing to clear my head. The ball hit the rim and bounced off for the 3rd time in a row. "Great," I muttered, jogging after it. "Real clutch, Torres." "Talking to yourself now?" came a voice from behind me. I froze mid-dribble. Max stood by the double doors, a thermos in one hand and a brown paper bag in the other. His hair was damp, his hoodie slightly rumpled. For once, he didn't look like he had all the answers. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. It came out sharper than I meant. Max shrugged, strolling in like he owned the place. "Rain messed up my plans. Figure I'd see if the future MVP was putting in the work." He tossed the paper bag onto the bench and leaned against the wall. "Not impressed so far." I glared, my chest tightening. I didn't ask for an audience. Good thing I'm not asking for permission. He unscrewed the thermos lid, steam rising as he poured himself a cup. "You want coffee, or are you sticking to sulking?" I hesitated, but walked over, grabbing the cup he offered. "Thanks," I muttered. The warmth spread through my fingers, but it did nothing for the tension knotting my chest. Max didn't say anything for a moment, just watched me. His gaze wasn't mocking or smug for once. It was searching. "You've got a lot on your mind," he said finally. I let out a humorous laugh. "That obvious, huh?" Max didn't answer right away. Instead, he nodded toward the bench. "Sit." Against my better judgment, I did. For a while, we just sat in silence, sipping coffee, the sound of the storm filling the space between us. It wasn't uncomfortable, though. If anything, it felt familiar. "You're getting better," Max said finally, breaking the quiet. I looked up. "Yeah, well, it helps having someone in my head constantly critiquing me." He smirked at that, but it faded quickly, his expression turning serious. You've got natural talent, Torres, but talent only gets you so far. I raised an eyebrow. What about you? I looked you up, you know. You had more than talent. You were unstoppable. Max's gaze dropped to his coffee, his fingers tightening around the cup. For a moment, I thought he wasn't going to answer. When you're good at something, he said slowly, his voice quieter than usual, it becomes your identity. You stop being a person. You're just a player. A career. A highlight reel. The words hung between us, heavy and raw. Max sighed, setting his coffee down. Torn ACL. Bad recovery. I tried to come back, but I wasn't the same. The scouts didn't care. Neither did the fans. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. One day, you're invincible. The next, you're nothing. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I just listened, my chest tightening as I watched the emotions flicker across his face. Pain, frustration, emptiness. You ever feel like that? I asked suddenly, looking up. Like no matter how hard you push, it's never enough. You're overthinking, he said, his tone quieter now. Trying to carry everything. Your game, your team, your future. It's written all over you. I stared at my hands. There's a lot riding on this, I admitted. Not just for me, but for Rob and the guys. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I keep thinking I'm going to screw it all up. Max sighed, setting his cup down. You still don't get it, do you? What's that supposed to mean? It means basketball's a team sport, Torres. His tone had an edge now. You keep talking about me, like you're the only one out there. Even if you had god-tier stats, it wouldn't mean a damn thing if the other team shut you down. I opened my mouth to argue, but he cut me off. Come on, he said, standing and grabbing a few cones from the corner. Let me show you something. Max set up the cones quickly, gesturing for me to follow. Think of these as defenders, he said. Now, the trick isn't just to get past them yourself. It's putting your teammates in positions where they can take the pressure off you. He ran through a quick simulation, moving the ball and using imaginary teammates as decoys. It was simple but effective, and for the first time, I saw the court differently. You don't have to be the guy who takes every shot, Max said, tossing me the ball. Sometimes, the best play is the one where you set someone else up. I frowned, processing his words. So you're saying I don't always have to be the hero? Max smiled, but there was a sadness in it. Sometimes being a leader means stepping back, trusting the people around you. His words hit harder than I expected. I've never thought about it like that, I admitted. Max smirked, leaning casually against the wall. That's because you've been too busy showing off. Hey! I threw the ball at him lightly. And for the first time in weeks, we both laughed. After running a few more plays together, Max tugged off his hoodie, revealing a lean, muscular frame that made me falter for just a second too long. Eyes on the ball, Torres, he teased, catching me staring. I started, but he just raised an eyebrow, that infuriating smirk firmly in place. Sure you weren't, he said, tossing me the ball. Now let's see if you can actually use what I just taught you. We went through the drill again, but my focus was slipping. Every time I moved, I could feel Max watching me, his gaze steady and unreadable. It was like the air between us had shifted, charged with something I couldn't name. By the time we finished, my heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the game. Not bad, Max said, leaning against the wall. You might actually be ready for this tournament. I rolled my eyes. You're so full of yourself. You keep telling yourself that, he shot back, grabbing a stray ball. You still can't keep up. Oh, I'm keeping up. I stepped closer, my smirk challenging his. Prove it, he said, his eyes glinting with a playful edge that made my chest tighten. Before I could think twice, I stepped into his space. Our breaths mingled, the ball slipping away from my fingers to the floor. The shift was instant. His gaze dipped to my lips for the briefest second, and something inside me snapped. I grabbed his arm, closing the gap between us, and kissed him. It was fast, messy, and over almost as soon as it started. Max pulled back first, his hand still lingering on my side, his breathing uneven. Torres, he began, but the sharp metallic clang of the gym door slamming shut cut him off. We both turned toward the exit, my pulse pounding in my ears as I scanned for movement. What was that? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Max's jaw tightened, his eyes lingering on the door. Probably the wind, he said, but his tone wavered, a flicker of unease crossing his face before he turned away, grabbing his hoodie and thermos on his way out. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone's screen. The messages I'd sent Max sat there, blue bubbles with no replies, each one feeling heavier than the last. Hey, you good? About earlier. We should talk. Nothing. Not even a red receipt. The kiss replayed in my head over and over, like a song stuck on loop. Every time I told myself it was no big deal, that I'd just gotten caught up in the moment. But deep down, I knew better. Had I made a mistake? The sound of a faint knock on my door pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. I turned toward the window, catching a glimpse of Rob's face through the streaked glass. His hoodie was pulled tight, his hair plastered to his forehead. He knocked again, louder this time. What are you doing out there? I asked, sliding the window open. Heading to Archie's for ice cream, he said, grinning like he hadn't just interrupted my existential crisis. Except, the grin didn't quite reach his eyes. Thought you'd want to come. I hesitated, scratching the back of my neck. Nah, I'm good. Got caught in the storm earlier. Still trying to dry off. The grin dropped, his expression hardening. Right. Figures. We don't hang out much these days anyway. That's not fair, I started, frowning. Isn't it? He crossed his arms, the rain dripping off his sleeves. Practice, drills, tournaments. That's all you care about now. It's not like that, Rob, I said, leaning against the window frame. I've just been under a lot of pressure lately. You know how it is. Sure, he said flatly, stepping back. Good luck with all that pressure. Rob, but he turned, shoving his hands into his pockets as he disappeared into the rainy night. I stayed by the window long after he was gone, the rain blurring the glass as I stared into the darkness. The next morning, the moment I stepped into the gym, it was obvious something was very wrong. A quick scan of the room confirmed my suspicions. Max wasn't here. Whispers fluttered around the room. Where's Coach Donovan? I spotted Rob leaning against the locker room door, avoiding my eyes, and looking awfully suspicious. My stomach sank as my brain began working a mile per minute and connecting the dots. Rob, I said, marching over. He flinched. What did you do? Not here, he muttered, trying to walk away, but I wasn't having it. I grabbed his arm, dragging him into the locker room. Rob didn't even wait for me to ask. I reported him, he said, crossing his arms. The words knocked the air out of me. You what? I did it for you, Ryan, Rob snapped. You're distracted. This tournament is everything, and he's in the way. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Rob was my best friend. He couldn't have done this. You didn't do this for me, I spat. I can't believe you do this to Max, after all he's done for us. Dude, wait. He reached for me, but I was already storming out. 5 minutes later, Max hunched over the trunk of his car, placing a bag into it. You're leaving? I asked, breathless. He didn't look at me. No reason to stay. Max, you can't. This is for the best, he cut in, shutting the trunk. No, it's not, my voice cracked. You're just running away. He turned to me, his eyes sharp. I crossed a line. Your friend's coming for me, and I'm not sticking around to make it worse. So that's it? I demanded. You're pretending none of it mattered? It mattered, he said quietly. That's why I can't stay. The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. You're not the only one who wanted it, I said. I kissed you too. Max's face softened, but he shook his head. Ryan, you have a future. A really bright one. Don't mess it up. Not for me. Please, Max, don't go, I pleaded. His eyes lingered on mine before he stepped into the driver's seat. Focus on your dreams. I've shown you all I can anyways. And then he was gone, his car disappearing into the rain. 2 weeks later. The game was almost over, but I wasn't in it. I sat on the bench, staring at the court as if I weren't even there. I'd subbed out in the second quarter. Let them have their glory. A loud buzzer buzzed and the crowd erupted into deafening cheers. Rob sank the final shot, clinching nationals. The team erupted into celebration, the gym vibrating with energy. But I slipped out through the back hallway, my chest hollow. I'd promised to see this through, but every game, every win had felt like I was just going through the motions. The scouts were already lined up, offering me futures I wasn't even sure I wanted anymore. And then, I saw him. Max. He was leaning against the wall like he'd been waiting for me, his arms crossed, his gray eyes catching mine instantly. I told you could do it, he said, his voice steady, almost teasing. I froze. My breath caught, and before I knew it, I was charging at him, pulling him into a hug that sent us both crashing to the floor. Ryan! Max laughed, startled but warm. It wasn't his usual cocky laugh. This one was softer, more real. I clung to him, my chest tight, my voice breaking. Where the hell have you been? Max sighed, his hands resting on my shoulders. Around, he said cryptically. My face fell, the sting of his answer sharper than I expected. But, he added softly, I caught every game. My head shot up, my eyes searching his. You did? He smiled, that familiar, infuriating smile. Of course. You were incredible. Efficient. Focused. I mean, that buzzer beater against Central? Oh, perfect timing. I couldn't stop the grin breaking across my face, my chest filling with something I hadn't felt in weeks. You mean it? Yeah, Max said, his voice dipping lower, almost serious. When you left, I stopped hearing your voice in my head. You know, all that trash talking, the ridiculous overconfidence. I had to find a way to make up for it. I laughed despite myself, swiping at my face. You're such a jerk. He grinned. Yeah, but I'm also right. And you just crushed your biggest career obstacle, so congratulations. Max paused, his expression softening. Can I kiss you? The question caught me off guard, my breath hitching. Does this mean we're actually doing this? Giving this a shot? He shrugged, his lips quirking up in that trademark smirk. I'm not your coach anymore, and you've proven you can handle anything. I don't see why not. I didn't hesitate this time. I leaned in, closing the space between us as his lips met mine. For the first time in weeks, the ache in my chest disappeared. Max was here, and I wasn't letting him go again. Conclusion. The weeks that followed were some of the best of my life. With Max's help, I picked the Capital City Go-Go, a G League team known for developing future stars. Max was meticulous. breaking down every offer like a playbook, and his insight was invaluable. Being with him wasn't just about basketball. I saw new sides of Max. His humor, his kindness, his unwavering belief in me. And it made me realize how much better we were together. Coach Benson recovered and returned, a steady presence on the sidelines again. Rob and the others landed decent G League offers too. They didn't have the luxury of picking like I did, but we were all moving forward in our own way. Training camp with Benson and Max pushed me harder than ever, sharpening every skill. When it was finally time to leave for my new team, it felt surreal. On the plane, I stared out the window, the city shrinking behind me. Max sat beside me, flipping through my training schedule. "Don't get too comfortable," he said with that familiar smirk. I leaned back, smirking myself. "Sure thing, coach." His gaze softened, and he added, "You're going to crush it, Torres. I know it." And for the first time, I didn't doubt it. New team, new challenges, and Max right there with me. The future had never looked brighter. The end. Have you ever had your career and love interest collide? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and to stay wholesome.